Just before we get into the video today, a quick word from our sponsor, NordVPN. You know, one way to keep safe online is to always be paying with cash, but I've tried shoving bundles of money into my computer and it just doesn't work. So I had to use my credit card, like all of those fancy millennials. And if you're buying things online using public Wi-Fi, think, coffee shops, airports, etc., you really should be using a VPN, and that's where NordVPN comes in. I know it's tempting not to bother and can kind of just hope for the best, but really those stories you read about people having their data stolen, they do happen, and you don't want to make it easy for people to do that. Whenever I'm browsing on public Wi-Fi, I just keep my VPN on all the time so I don't even have to worry about people stealing my data. But it's not all just about security. You can also use it to change the country you appear to be in, so you can get content that might normally be only available in a different geographic location, and it's super fast as well. And you can use it on 6 devices with just 1 account. Also, there's no logs at all. NordVPN are based in Panama, so they don't have to keep any logs, which is great for your privacy. Indeed, they're the only VPN to get a perfect score from PC Mag. Start protecting your internet privacy today at nordvpn.com/brainfood and use the code BRAINFOOD to get 70% off a 3-year plan plus a month for free. So a long-standing bit of fodder for conspiracy theorists of the American persuasion includes various imagery found on the United States $1 bill, with the most infamous of graphics on said nefarious item being the so-called all-seeing eye, more properly titled the Eye of Providence. To add some wood to the fire, it turns out that the Eye of Providence is used by none other than everyone's second favorite source of conspiracy theories, the Freemasons. So what's up with such a blatant use of this secret society symbol on the dollar bill? Well, it turns out, while many point to the Freemasons and Illuminati as the source of this particular symbol, there is another organization behind it, one that has for centuries worked tirelessly to bend governments the world over to their will. We are, of course, now talking about Christianity. While many conspiracy theorists today will say the Eye of Providence represents Satan, in truth, it has represented God watching over humanity for at least half a millennia or so. Beyond God's eye, the commonly added triangle around the eye represents the Trinity, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. As for the sun rays, also commonly shown around the eye, this is meant to represent God's divinity. You can see a prime historic example of this in Jacopo Pontormo's 1525 painting, Supper of Emmaus, as well as on many historic church buildings, stained glass windows, and things like that. So how did this Christian symbol end up on the dollar bill? When the Continental Congress kicked King George III to the curb, they needed an official seal for the new nation. Towards this end, they tasked Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams with creating one. These 3 titans of American history in turn enlisted the aid of an artist named Pierre-Eugène de Cimetière to help out. As for Franklin, he pushed for a seal that, in his own words, depicted Moses standing on the shore and extending his hand over the sea, thereby causing the same to overwhelm Pharaoh, who is sitting in an open chariot, a crown on his head and a sword in his hand, raised from a pillar of fire in the clouds, reaching to Moses to express that he acts by command of the deity. The motto he wanted on the seal was "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God," a motto Jefferson would eventually use on his own personal seal. Speaking of Jefferson, he also wanted to go with biblical imagery, in this case wanting a depiction of the Israelites wandering through the wilderness with a cloud and a pillar of fire guiding them. An interesting choice for a man who once wrote his own version of the Bible that got rid of all the supernatural elements, among other parts that he didn't agree with. Moving on to Adams, he wanted the Choice of Hercules painting used for the seal. In it, Hercules is flanked by 2 women representing virtue and vice, 2 paths he could choose. One of the paths was for his own pleasure and a life of ease. On the other side was a life of hardship, but glory. Finally, de Cimetière suggested a shield with the initials of the 13 states on it. Flanking the shield was a female representation of liberty holding an anchor and a spear. On the other side stood a man holding a rifle and a tomahawk. Above all is the Eye of Providence in a triangle with sun rays shining down, indicating God being on the side of the new nation. De Cimetière also went with E pluribus unum, out of many, one, for the motto. This slogan was borrowed from the Gentleman's Magazine, which used it to represent many articles collected from various outlets and put into one magazine. When these ideas were presented to Congress on August 20th, 1776, they weren't big fans of any of them, though made some suggestions of modifications to de Cimetière's and to potentially go forward with that one. However, rather than send it back for reworking after these suggestions were made, they just tabled the matter. About 4 years later, in March of 1780, Congress once again figured that it was time to get someone to work on an official seal, and this time tasked a slightly less prestigious group with the job. That was James Lovell, John Moran Scott, and William Churchill Houston. Like their predecessors, this group brought in outside help in one Francis Hopkinson, perhaps better remembered today for designing the first official United States flag. Hopkinson went ahead and adapted the shield concept, but modified it just to show 13 stripes. Most notably to the progression of the seal, he also included an olive branch, an arrow held by an Indian man, 13 stars, and included a slogan of Bello vel pace paratus, meaning prepared in war or peace. Finally, he included the date of 1776 in Roman numerals. Beyond this version, he also came up with a second one, but both were eventually rejected and the matter once again tabled. While you might think the third time would be a charm, not so much. About 2 years later, in May of 1782, Congress tasked John Rutledge, Elias Boudinot, who would later be replaced with Arthur Lee, and Arthur Middleton with creating the seal. Yet again, the trio brought on board someone else to do the actual work, in this case a lawyer by the name of William Barton. Most pertinent to the progression here, his design included, among other things, an eagle and, on the reverse, a pyramid with the Eye of Providence above it, though without the triangle that had been present in the first committee's version. Although, funnily enough, he originally thought to put a palm tree on top of the pyramids, as he observed that, when cut down, palm trees generally grow again from the same roots just as strong as ever. After he wisely switched to the more broadly appealing Eye of Providence, he went with the slogan Deo Favente, with God favoring. Congress, as ever, observed the results of the committee's work and responded with another big old meh. Apparently not content to wait around for too long this time, almost directly after, on June the 13th, 1782, they gave Secretary of Congress Charles Thomson the task of creating the seal. Rather than giving the job to someone else, he just did it himself. Borrowing something from all of the previous designs, what he came up with was eventually as follows. Besides the shield with stripes representing the states, he depicted a bald eagle holding an olive branch and one talon representing peace. In the other talon, the eagle is holding 13 arrows, one for each of the original 13 states, with the arrows representing the United States' readiness to fight to protect its interests. However, the eagle's head is turned toward the olive branch, symbolic of the nation preferring peaceful relations. Further, representing the 13 original states are 13 stars over the eagle's head. The final motto chosen was the aforementioned and fitting E pluribus unum. On the reverse side of the seal is Barton's unfinished pyramid, with said pyramid representing, as Thomson himself notes, strength and duration. The 13 layers represent the 13 states which comprise the nation. The Eye of Providence at the top, as mentioned, represents God watching over the nation. The text Annuit Coptis is also included, roughly meaning He, God, has favored our undertaking. On the bottom is the text Novus Ordo Seclorum, meaning roughly a new order of the ages, inspired from a line in Virgil's Eclogue 4. Also included at the base of the pyramid are the Roman numerals for the year of the establishment of that new order, 1776. And so it was that on June the 20th, 1782, Congress approved Thomson's design based on the description alone, as at this point Thomson hadn't actually drawn it up yet, simply giving descriptive notes and the thought process behind each element. Of course, for those who don't want to trust the guy who designed it, an alternate hypothesis as to the origin and symbols used here is succinctly outlined in an article titled Satan on the United States Dollar. First of all, I will interpret the Latin words on the seal Annuit Coptis, meaning announcing the birth of, and Novus Ordo Seclorum means New World Order. So therefore, it says announcing the birth of the New World Order. The date in Roman numerals is 1776, the year the modern Illuminati was formed, and also the year of American independence. The Latin E pluribus unum means one out of many. That is, order out of chaos, which is the foundation of the New World Order's plan to unify the world's governments, religions, and money systems into one, so the world can be controlled. Why the Antichrist must come soon. The capstone has not come down on the pyramids. This means that the plan is not complete. Only when the New World Order is established upon all nations and the world leader is enthroned, the plan will be complete. On that note, for those who think the Illuminati or Freemasons are behind the symbols, the good news for conspiracy theorists is it turns out that they're absolutely true. Oh, that's weird.
On that note, for those who think the Illuminati or Freemasons are behind the symbols, while the Illuminati were technically created in May of 1776, this organization was not founded in America, but rather Bavaria. Further, funny enough, given the way they are depicted in Hollywood and books today, they were founded not as a mystic, shadowy organization, but on principles in opposition to superstitions, obscurantism, essentially withholding or obscuring knowledge from the general public, and against abuses of state power, particularly the abuses of religious groups who were so heavily influencing said governments toward their their own ends at the time. Thus, the original Illuminati would have been greatly opposed to the Illuminati generally depicted in fiction today. The Illuminati, however, didn't ever gain much traction, nor did it last long, as the Duke of Bavaria, Charles Theodore, with the support of the Catholic Church, saw to it that such societies as the Illuminati and the Freemasons were outlawed and persecuted in the region. Thus, given its location and relatively small size and influence, it would be quite a stretch to think they somehow influenced the Eye of Providence and pyramid being put on the United States seal when it was. Further, as noted, contrary to what is often put forth, this New Order and the date of 1776 couldn't be more explicit that it represents the new United States government, literally placed at the base of the pyramid built of the 13 states, with God watching over and approving of them all. As to the Freemasons, the only member of that organization who had anything at all to do with the creation of the seal was Ben Franklin, but his proposal was for the aforementioned Moses imagery, not a pyramid with the Eye of Providence. His slogan was also quite different than the whole New Order one that would eventually be chosen. It's also noteworthy that at the time the United States seal was created, it wasn't a symbol of the Freemasons. They didn't adopt the Eye of Providence until 1797. On top of that, the Freemason version uses a cloud above the eye instead of a triangle around it. This was another relatively common version in Christianity going back to at least the 17th century. It's not really clear why the Freemasons chose this version once they did adopt the symbol. And on top of all of this, the original creation of this imagery for the US seal only came about after not one, not two, but three rejected designs over the span of several years made by three separate committees, with nobody in Congress liking what they came up with. Thus, if a shadowy group running the world's governments was really behind it all, they showed some pretty poor organizational skills in their attempt to try to reveal themselves on the United States seal for, I don't know, reasons, we guess? So that's where the seal came from and the actual meaning behind it. How did it get on the dollar bill, though? This wouldn't happen until about a century and a half after the creation of the seal, though funny enough did have to do with a couple of Freemasons. To begin with, the US didn't really bother with paper money for a long while into its history, with the exception of Continental Congress trying to raise some funds by issuing continental currency in 1775. However, there was an inherent flaw in the way this paper money system was enacted, at least according to Ben Franklin. Instead of backing the money with land assets, as Franklin had suggested, they were backed by rarely collected taxes by the states themselves, as the Continental Congress couldn't itself collect taxes at the time, the whole government body collecting taxes for its populace being a bit of a sore spot for the then rebel group. This, combined with the fact that the notes were easily counterfeited, saw them become mostly worthless, and thus the young nation abandoned an official paper money currency, though this didn't stop many banks in the US from issuing their own paper money to fill in the gap in the market beyond coins. It wouldn't be until 1861 that the US government itself would put into general circulation its own paper money again in the form of demand notes nicknamed greenbacks. This finally brings us to the creation of the $1 bill. First issued in 1862, unlike the dollar bill of modern times, this did not sport the Eye of Providence, nor even George Washington. Rather, it showed a guy by the name of Salmon P. Chase, the Secretary of the Treasury at the time, who apparently saw his chance for history to remember him, and he took it. What followed from here were several iterations of the dollar bill, starting with a rather prominent change in 1869, now showing George Washington, with the switch partially spurred by the fact that Congress decided to pass a bill that prohibited living people from appearing in various items, including currency notes. Later in 1886, Martha Washington would also grace the face of the $1 bill for a bit. Fast forwarding about a half century, a slew of changes to the dollar bill over the course of a decade or so ultimately saw the Eye of Providence added in 1935. The idea behind this particular change, one of the last to the dollar bill, came from the Secretary of Agriculture and future Vice President Henry Wallace. The inspiration here for Wallace came from reading a copy of the 1909 work by Gellert Hunt, which gave a detailed account of the genesis of the United States seal. Most pertinent to the topic at hand is that it included image copies of not just the front of the seal, which many people were familiar with, but the reverse with the pyramid. At the time, this was largely unknown and unused. In fact, Wallace himself, while he was a Freemason, so familiar with the Eye of Providence from that, as well as its prominence in Christianity, himself had never seen the reverse of the United States seal before. Not just liking the imagery, Wallace also noted that the Novus Ordo Seclorum, New Order of the Ages motto of the American government, could be tied into Roosevelt's own New Deal, hence the New Deal for the ages. Thus, Wallace suggested Roosevelt have the reverse side of the US seal put on a coin. Roosevelt loved the idea, but decided to put it on the dollar bill instead. However, before going through with it, he first ran the idea by his cabinet, among other potential objections, wondering if any religious group would be offended by putting a Christian symbol on the dollar, or conversely, if any Christian group might see it as him trying to put a version of a Freemason symbol there. In the end, after going around the room to ask various religious members of the cabinet their opinions, including devout Irish Catholic and Postmaster General James Farley, it was decided that it was likely various Christian groups would react positively to use of their symbol, and the whole Freemason connection wouldn't be an issue, particularly as it was really just using the reverse of the official US seal, not something Roosevelt himself came up with. Thus, the idea was pushed forward. Since the addition of the US seal imagery in 1935, the dollar bill has changed little other than "In God We Trust" added in 1957 to further double down on the whole religious theme, among a few other minor modifications. Now, how about a bonus fact? Speaking of continental currency, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the 1776 third of a dollar. The note depicts a sundial with the sun shining on it. Also included are the English words, "mind your business," as well as the Latin word fugio, meaning "I flee." This was designed by none other than Ben Franklin, who loved to embed subtle satire or humor into just about everything he was involved in, which has been speculated to be why he was not given the task of being the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, instead just an advisor to the much less talented and less distinguished writer Thomas Jefferson. Whatever the case, in this case, Franklin was going for a picture and a word puzzle on the paper bill, which essentially sums up as "I, time and money, flies, so mind your business." This design later gave rise to the Fugio cent, also designed by Ben Franklin, minted in 1787 with more or less the same thing depicted. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. We've got brand new videos just like this every day of the week for your viewing pleasure. And as always, thank you for watching.